All right, well, here's our first lesson. We're going to jump right into chapter one. We're going to take a look at what economics is and some of the foundations of economics. So here we go. Just to remind you, of course, this is Survey of Economics. And to get things started, I wanted you to take a look at this video clip from the old Batman TV show, because some people have a misconception about what economics is.
Gosh, economics is sure a dull subject.
Oh, you must be jesting, Dick. Economics dull? The glamour, the romance of commerce? It's the very lifeblood of our country's society. Frankly, I can think of nothing more stimulating than economics and commerce. Yes, Alfred?
Begging your pardon, sir. It's the telephone in the study, sir.
Come on, Dick. This may lead us to a more practical lesson in loss and gain.
I'm with you. So long, Aunt Harriet.
Dick Grayson, the ward to Bruce Wayne. He doesn't get it. Economics, he says, is such a dull subject. And he couldn't be more wrong. Bruce Wayne tries to explain it to him, but maybe not in the way that an economist would like it to be explained. It's more than just the lifeblood of our economy. There's so much more to understanding economics. It's not just business. Most of the decisions that we make, in fact, one could say all of the decisions that you ever make in your life are based on economics. And it's not money, and it's not profit and loss, and it's not gain and loss like Bruce Wayne was talking about there. There's more to it than that. We need to understand what economics is before we start to cast it off as such a dull subject, because as you're going to see in this class, it really isn't dull at all. It is probably the most important class you'll take in college. So let's start to explore that a little bit more and see if we can understand what economics is, first of all, because if we don't understand what economics is, we're going to miss the importance of it in our lives. First of all, let's explore why we study economics in the first place. One of the reasons we study economics is to understand where prices come from. We're going to get into that when we look at demand and supply. But that in and of itself doesn't really fully explain why we study economics. We study economics to understand something about business and the choices that businesses make. We want to know something about profit. We want to understand something about why businesses make the choices that they do, why they set the prices that they do, why they produce the goods that they do. And that's fine. That's a good reason to study economics, but that really doesn't get to the heart of it either. To the extent possible, we want to understand why policymakers make the choices that they make, why they pass the policies that they make. Why do they say we need a stimulus package? Why do they say we're going to shut the economy down when we have COVID? Why are policymakers why do they make the choices that they make? Those are all fundamentally economic choices, and they can have huge impacts on society. So studying economics not only helps us to understand something about businesses, but it also helps us to understand more about policy. And it can help us to understand if those policymakers are doing the right thing. Are they making the choices that are appropriate under the circumstances? We could say that we study economics just simply to be better people, to be more informed people, to be more educated people, to make better choices in our lives, to make better use of the resources that we have at our disposal. One of the quotes on the front page of your syllabus was from an economist named Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell says the first lesson of economics is scarcity. And that's absolutely true. We'll explore that here in a minute. But scarcity, kind of in a nutshell, says that there's never enough of anything to satisfy all of the people who want it. That's a really important thing. But the first lesson of politics, sadly, is to totally disregard that first lesson of economics. They disregard the first lesson of economics and they promise everything to everybody. So when it comes to policymakers, no matter what party you're in, it doesn't matter. We're going to see people who disregard basic economics. And that's something that we as citizens, as people who get a vote for our leaders, we need to know that. We need to hold those people accountable, because if we don't understand the basics of economics, then we're going to be hoodwinked all the time by politicians who come along and say, oh, here's what I can give you. So let's explore a little bit more formally about that notion of scarcity. Why do we study economics? To get at that, I want to take a look at another short film clip here from Harry Potter. Because at the beginning of the Harry Potter saga, we get what is perhaps the best phrase to explain why we study economics.
What happened?
I swear I don't know. 1 minute the glass was there and then it was gone. It was like magic.
There's no such thing as magic.
Uncle Vernon. Thank you very much, Uncle Vernon. That's Harry's uncle. Of course, Harry's being thrown into his cupboard under the stairs. But Uncle Vernon gives us that one line that helps us to understand why we study economics. Because there's no such thing as magic. Think about magic. One of the things that people imagine themselves doing if they were magicians would be to wave a wand and have something show up right in front of them. Maybe you want a ham sandwich. You wave your magic wand, poof, there's a ham sandwich. Oh, that's terrific. Or you're short on cash, so you wave your magic wand and boom, there's a pile of cash. Well, there's no such thing as magic. You can't just wave your wand and out of thin air have those things in front of you. Those things that are going to help to satisfy some of the wants that you have. Maybe even some of the needs that you have. But magic doesn't exist. And because magic doesn't exist, we have to figure out ways to deal with this problem of not having the stuff that we want to have. That's where economists come in. That's where economics comes in. So what is economics? Well, economics is the study of how people allocate their limited resources to fulfill their unlimited wants. We want lots of stuff. It may be cars, it may be houses, it may be books, it might be clean air. It might be clean water. It might be a vaccine for COVID. People want lots of stuff. But we have limited resources to fulfill those wants. I'd love to have a beach house, but they're really expensive, and I don't have enough money to buy one. I'd like a new pickup truck, but I had to get my wife a new car, so I'm stuck with my 2004 Tacoma. There are things that we want to have in life. Some of them are just, just kind of things on the side. But there are also lots of things that we need to have that we still don't have enough resources for. There's plenty of people who don't have food. There are people who don't have a place to live. They have limited resources to fulfill their wants. And as economists, we study those kinds of situations. We study those behaviors. We study how people in this world deal with those kinds of problems. And remember, we study economics because there's nobody with a magic wand waving it, giving people the things that they want and need. There's no such thing as magic that allows us to have the stuff that we want and need. Economics boils down to this one word, and I referenced it a little bit earlier, this word scarcity. Scarcity means that there's not enough to go around. That's all that it means, and we have this problem of scarcity, and humans always are going to have this problem of scarcity. There's never going to be enough to go around. In fact, we can go back to the beginning of time. At the beginning of human history, we see people. We hear about people. We hear the stories of people. Think about, from the Bible, the origin of man. We have Adam and Eve in the garden. And they have everything that they want, everything that they need. And then the serpent comes along. The serpent, the snake says, hey, Eve, come here. Come here, Eve. I want you to taste the fruit of this tree right here, Eve. And Eve's like, no, I can't do that. That's God told us not to eat from that tree. And the snake says, oh, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's good. It's good to eat. It's pleasing to the eye. Come on, take a bite. And so Eve takes a bite. She gives some to Adam, because Adam's just hanging around, doing nothing. She gives it to Adam. Adam takes a bite. They're like, yeah, it's pretty good. And then God shows up. God says, Adam, where are you at, Adam? Adam's like, I'm over here, God. What are you doing over there, Adam? Well, I'm a little afraid. I ate the fruit from the tree you told me not to eat from. And God's like, why did you do that? Of course, Adam blames it on Eve, and Eve blames it on the snake. And God's like, oh, you guys, why did you do this? And you can imagine God reaching his hand down from heaven and just kind of flicking those two out of the Garden of Eden. And that's when economics starts. Economics starts when Adam and Eve leave the Garden of Eden and have to start working for things. They realize, ooh, work is hard. We don't like to work. Work is a pain in the neck and a pain in the back and a pain everywhere else. We don't want to work. We want back in the garden, but it's too late. Now you're dealing with scarcity. You're dealing with this problem of unlimited wants, but limited resources to fulfill those wants. That's sort of the course of all of human history, is how do we deal with these problems? Scarcity is the issue in economics that we face. So how do we face that? What are the ways we go about dealing with scarcity? Well, let's take a look at some of the basic foundations of economics to help us to begin to understand how man deals with scarcity. To do that, we want to understand this idea of the economic problem. The economic problem is really just boils down to scarcity. That there isn't enough to go around. You're not going to have enough of all the stuff that you want. Even if you have all the money in the world, you're not going to have enough of all the stuff that you want. That's the economic problem. How do we deal with that? To get your hands around this a little bit more, let me ask you a relatively innocent question. If you could be a superhero, which superhero would you be? If you could be a superhero, what power would you want to have? Maybe before you answer that question, you might want to ask, well, why would I want to be a superhero? What does being a superhero mean? What does that provide for me? Well, almost every superhero has some sort of power. Some of them are just, sort of in the Batman lexicon. What's your superpower, Batman? Well, I'm rich. That's his superpower. But he's super intelligent, and he's got a great skill set. He's a great detective. Why would you want to be a superhero? Well, because superheroes allow you to do really cool things. So think about that for a minute. If you could be a superhero, which superhero would you be? Or which superpower would you want to have? We're probably all going, there'll be some overlap here, but most of us are going to answer this question uniquely. But regardless of how you answer that question, the power that you have is going to help you to overcome some degree of scarcity. That's why we want to be superheroes. We don't think about it that way. We say, I want to be able to do this. I want to be able to fly. I want to be able to transport myself. I want to be able to read people's minds. Yeah, during an exam, wouldn't that be convenient? If I could read the teacher's mind, I would know what the answer is. Well, I want to run fast. I want to have super strength. I want to have some sort of superpower to help me overcome some limitation that I face. My superpower, the one I would like to have, the superhero I would like to be is Flash. I run a lot. The problem, of course, is as I get older, I run slower. And I don't like that. I want to be fast. Not that I was super fast when I was younger, but I was much faster than I am now. That's what I would like to have. This problem that I face in life, this issue of scarcity is, is a physical limitation. And having that superpower would allow me to overcome that limitation. That would be outstanding. I would love that. Deadpool, one of his superpower is basically that he heals instantaneously. Man, wouldn't that be great in the era of COVID? I can heal instantaneously. I can get past these viruses. I don't have to wear a mask. I don't have to be Deadpool and wear a mask. He does it for the fashion statement and because he's hideously scarred underneath. And so that's good for everybody. But you wouldn't have to wear a mask if you could instantly heal the virus. You get the virus is gone. Oh, that would be outstanding. So superpowers allow us to deal with scarcity. I'm sure the writers don't think about it this way, but it's a way to deal with an economic constraint, an economic problem. Now, as we study economics, we're going to focus our attention on 3 specific areas. We're going to first of all start with how people make decisions. How you and I make the choices that we make, choose the things that we choose. Secondly, we're going to look at how people interact with each other. And thirdly, we're going to look at how the entire economy works as a whole. So basically this first part, how people make decisions, this is going to cover the basics of economics, the cornerstones, the foundations of economics. And then we're going to look at how people interact with each other. That's going to be essentially the microeconomic portion of the course. So we're going to talk here about markets, the way we distribute goods, the way businesses make choices to maximize their profits. That's going to be the micro stuff. And then the macro section of the class is how the entire economy works as a whole. How do we fit the pieces at the micro level together to get the big picture? So those are the things that we're going to focus our attention on as we move forward. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to focus just on number 1 here. So to do that, we have to understand what the cornerstones of economics are, the foundations of economics, the foundations upon which the subject matter that we're going to study rests. The first of our cornerstones is that all choices entail costs. And this goes back to that quote by Thomas Sowell. Scarcity is the first thing you learn in economics. And then in politics, you learn to forget that first rule of economics. When you make choices, you have a cost involved. So no matter what choice you make at the political level, you've got to give up something. You can't have more of everything all the time. That's a fundamental reality. We're going to explore more about that here in a few minutes. But we sort of under this heading of all choices entailing costs, what that means is that there are trade-offs in life. There are things we have to give up when we make a choice. You're all choosing to take this class. What could you be doing? That's a trade-off. So we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But when we entail those costs, or when we make those choices and those costs are foisted upon us, the costs are almost always something other than money. Yeah, money's involved. But a cost is not necessarily monetary. We call the costs that are involved in making a choice, we call those opportunity costs. They're the things that you give up when you make the choice that you make. So all choices entail costs. That's the first cornerstone of economics. And again, we'll explore this in more detail here in just a minute. The second cornerstone is that decisions are made at the margin. That's a little bit weird to say things like that. So we'll get to what that means and develop that shortly. The third cornerstone is that incentives matter. Incentives get people to do things that they might not otherwise want to do. And they keep people from doing things that they might otherwise want to do. Incentives are incredibly important things, but we better be careful because if we screw the incentives up, we could end up having unintended consequences. And finally, our last cornerstone is that trade creates value. All right, so those are the cornerstones of economics. Let's break each one of these down here in a little bit more detail. First, choices entail costs. Economists are fond of saying there's no such thing as a free lunch. And what we mean by that isn't that you can't go out to lunch and have somebody pay for you. That's not what we mean. What we mean is that whenever you make a choice to go to lunch, you must necessarily give up doing something else. This mouse thinks he's going to get a free lunch. That's no free lunch there. Even if he does make his way off of that, take that cheese and get it off the trap and make his way back to his mouse hole to have a feast, it's still not a free lunch. There's stuff that he has to do to prepare to get the cheese, and there are things that he could be doing right now rather than hanging from the ceiling trying to steal a piece of cheese off of a mousetrap. Choices entail costs, and what that means is when you make a choice, you've got to give up something. That's the definition of a choice. You have a choice to take this class on ground or online. If you choose on ground, you give up the online option. If you choose online, you give up the on ground option. That's a choice that you make. When you hit the snooze bar, that's a choice that you make. You're giving up 5 minutes of doing something productive versus 5 minutes more of sleep. There's a choice that's made, and consequently there's a cost involved with that choice. Every choice you make involves a cost. You've got to give up something. You've chosen to come to Robert Morris. You could have chosen to go to maybe another school. You could have maybe chosen to go to work. You could have chosen to take a gap year and go hike through Switzerland. There are all kinds of things you could have been doing other than taking this class, but you made this choice. Those other things are costs. If you could be a superhero, say Spider-Man, wouldn't that be pretty cool? Spider-Man's a pretty awesome superhero. I mean, he's got the strength to weight ratio of a spider, which has a strength to weight ratio that's sort of off the charts. He can climb walls, he can swing from building to building, he's got his spider sense. He's got all of these really cool things that he can do. But, as his Uncle Ben is fond of saying, with great power comes great responsibility. And that's kind of a downer, Uncle Ben. Man, I want to be a superhero. I want to do cool things. But his Uncle Ben reminds him, well, you've got this power, and now you've got a responsibility to use it in a way to help other people. And when Peter Parker realizes that in the comics, that means that he is giving up some significant opportunities, some significant things that a teenage kid wants to be able to do. And in one of the most iconic panels in all of comics, we see that Spider-Man kind of gets sick of being Spider-Man. And Peter Parker, after having to turn down a date with Mary Jane, a party with Gwen Stacy, after seeing his grades slide, after not being able to hold a job, he says, you know what, nuts to this all stuff. I don't want to do this. There's too much responsibility. And he chucks the spider costume into the trash can. And he walks off and he says, look, I was just a young, unthinking teenager when I first became Spider-Man, but the years have a way of slipping by, of changing the world about us. And every day, sooner or later, boys are going to have to put away their toys and become a man. And he's like, this is just play acting. Forget it. I got to go take responsibility for myself and my family. Aunt May needs help. I want to just be able to do the things that normal people do. And being Spider-Man isn't normal. So he makes the choice to give up being Spider-Man because of all of the opportunity costs that he is incurring being that superhero. If you could be a superhero, would you see that as great power and that great responsibility? Would you help other people with your superpower at the expense of doing certain things? Those are opportunity costs. And even superheroes in the comic books, these made-up worlds, they face opportunity costs. Opportunity costs are all around us. We got to make choices. Nursing students, people in medicine have to make choices all the time. Sometimes we refer to this as triage. When people come into the emergency room with injuries, one of the first things that has to be done is to decide whose injury is most severe. Whose injury do we have to look at first? And here are two people with significant injuries. Well, maybe not significant injuries. Well, the one on the left certainly is a significant injury. Hey, doctor, I got a nail through my finger. Okay, we need to make a choice very, very quickly. We're going to see you in the emergency room We're going to see you very, very soon. Do not wait. This other person on the right comes in and says, oh, I have an ouchie, I have a boo-boo. Can you help me here, please? And they say, you go sit over there. We've got some more important cases to deal with first. We'll get to you eventually. If you see the person with the boo-boo first, the other person might lose their finger. You make the choice to see the less severe injury. There's a significant cost involved with that. So the choices that we make in all walks of life have costs involved. And sometimes those costs can be pretty significant. You don't think of a nurse in an ER. You don't think of a triage nurse as being an economist, but they most certainly are. They're making choices that involve costs. And we want them to do that. We hope they're very good at the triage aspect of this. We want them to make the choice that says, yeah, let's try to do what we can for this person on the left. Try to save their finger. Rather than say, oh, this is an easy case over here. We'll see you first. Because the cost can be enormous. Another illustration of this involves the internet and how much privacy you want to have on the internet and how much security you want to have on the internet. A survey a couple of years ago said that 60% of people say that government doesn't go far enough in protecting their security and protecting their information online. Well, the question there is how much anonymity, how much privacy do you want to give up to have more security? And how much convenience do you want to give up to have more security? Because I can make everything 100% secure. It's very easy to do. Businesses hem and haw and government policymakers worry about whether or not they are becoming too intrusive in the lives of people. Well, to protect their security, maybe that's important. Maybe that's what needs to be done. But again, I've got the solution here, and some of you probably have the same solution I do. If you want your resources, if you want your information to be 100% secure, it's very easy to do. All you do is reach over and you take that cord that's in the back of your computer, or you take that mouse and hover over the button that's connecting you to the wireless, and you just turn everything off. Turn off the wireless, unplug from the internet, unplug from whatever cable you are connected to that allows that information from the internet to stream into your computer. Unplug those things and you are 100% secure. Hackers can't get to you if you are not connected to the internet. And you might say, well, I don't want that. I want to be on the internet. And my reply to that will be, okay, that's great. So you're not willing to be 100% secure. It's a very simple proposition. How much security do you want? If you want 100% security, you've got to give up something. If you want 100% privacy, you've got to give up something. These are issues that we run across every day. We don't think about them as economics, but they are. Because you have unlimited wants. I want to be on the internet all the time, and I want 100% security. We have limited resources to fulfill those wants, and we have to make choices as a result. So that's the first of our cornerstones. Choices entail costs. The second of our cornerstones is the idea that decisions are made at the margin. So these are two of Nathan's hot dog eating contest's most famous faces. On the left, we have Joey Chestnut, who has won this contest a number of times, and he's gotten close to eating 80 hot dogs in the time period that is allowed, something like 10 minutes. The woman on the right there is a woman named Miki Sudo, and she is the woman's champion, and she puts him down pretty speedily as well. Now I have their picture up here because when we talk about making decisions at the margin, what we're talking about is the decision-making process that says, usually when we make a decision, it's not should we do something or not. Sometimes it is. But more often it's should we do one more of something. And that's what we mean by that word margin. Margins are small incremental changes. So in the case of Joey Chestnut and Mickey Sudo, we're talking about eating one more hot dog. Should I eat one more hot dog? Can I eat one more hot dog? And we use that one more as a way to, as kind of a benchmark. So we compare the additional benefits of something. So what's the additional benefit of eating one more hot dog against the additional cost of eating one more hot dog? We compare these things and we say, if the additional benefit or the marginal benefit, so the marginal benefit, if that's greater than the marginal cost, then it makes sense to do more of one activity. So Joey Chestnut eats one hot dog. He says, well, what's the additional benefit of eating a second one? It's far in excess of the cost, so I'm going to eat the second one. And I'm going to eat the third and the fourth and the fifth and the 10th and the 20th and the 40th and the 75th because the benefit still exceeds the cost. That's what we mean by making decisions at the margin. And we do this all the time in our lives. Should I sleep one more minute? Should I study one more hour for the economics test coming up? Well, is it worth it? I don't know. What's the additional cost? That's the question. Should I run one more mile? Well, compare the benefit to the cost. We do this all the time. Should you drive one more mile per hour faster? I don't know. It depends on where you are. It depends on what you're late for. It depends on a lot of things. And you as the decision maker, take those things into account. You may not sit down with a piece of paper and write out all of the additional benefits and additional costs of driving one more mile per hour faster. You do it in your head, and you do it really quickly. For most of our lives, we're already thinking about making decisions at the margin. We just haven't ever called it that before. Should I drink one more beer? I don't know. Sometimes when we make our decisions, we're not always thinking straight, like this guy. Should I just have one more drink? One more drink, please. And we say, no. You're not having any more to drink. The marginal benefits are less than the marginal costs. You may not be in a position to make that choice. Hopefully your friends are there to help you. Hopefully the bartender's like, oh, no way, dude, you're not having another one. But that's marginal thinking. We make better choices when we're not inebriated. We make better choices when we're not insane. We make better choices when we are in possession of our faculties. When we are, most of us make the choice of marginal thinking. Should I work one more hour? The boss says, hey, it's time to work on the weekend. You say, I don't want to work on the weekend. So they say, well, let me pay you time and a half. Now you're thinking at the margin. Well, the benefit to doing this just went up relative to the cost. That's marginal thinking, and we do this all the time. Our third foundation is that incentives matter. I mentioned that I like to run, and one of the reasons I like to run is because I also like to eat donuts. And I know that if I eat donuts in the volume that I would prefer to eat donuts, and I don't run, then I am going to put on a lot of weight. So I think to myself, well, I can run and eat donuts. And this little table gives you an idea of how many donuts one can eat to basically replenish the calories that you expend during certain races. So a 5K, so neighborhood 5K, local 5K, 3.1 miles, you can eat about 2 donuts. A 10K, you can eat about 3.5. Half marathon, that's 7.5 donuts. I've run lots of half marathons. And I've eaten 7.5 donuts or a little bit more after those races without any problem. I've never eaten 16 donuts after a full marathon. I can't remember, probably have had 11 or so. But to me, the incentive to eat donuts changes my behavior. I like the taste of them. I want to eat them. And so to make up for the calories that I would consume if I just ate donuts all the time, I go out and run. Incentives are factors that motivate us to act or exert effort. I mean, some days I don't want to run, but the motivation of a donut at the end of the run gets me out there. But incentives take on different forms. Incentives can be positive or negative, and incentives can be direct or indirect. So to understand incentives and the way that they work, we need to explore both of these categories. So, a direct incentive that's positive is that you get something if you do something. Positive incentives get you to do something. So here is something from a bygone era, Free Shirt Friday, and you see Dollar Dog Night and Jim Beam block parties and kids batting cap day and these giveaways at pirate games. Well, the problem, of course, is that the pirates stink, and so to get you to go to a game, they would have to give you stuff. It's a positive incentive. Hey, come to this game, get a free t-shirt, see our terrible team. It's a positive incentive. And we see lots of different positive incentives. Hey, study more, get good grades. That's a positive incentive. Hey, run more, get a donut. It's a positive incentive. Sign up for this virtual race and we'll send you a t-shirt and a medal. It's a positive incentive. Negative incentives are things that are in place to try to get you to not do something. So we'll pull you over if you're speeding. That's a negative incentive. We'll give you a ticket if you're speeding. And in Pennsylvania, those tickets can be pretty steep. We don't want you to do this kind of behavior. So we're going to penalize you if you do it, if you're caught. You know, the don't do drugs type of thing. Here's your brain. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs. Any question? That's a message of don't do drugs. The negative incentive is that your brain stops working right. So the direct incentives, the ones that are obvious, the ones that we look at, we say, oh yeah, clearly that's what happens. There's a clear cause and effect relationship. You do something, you get a reward, that's a positive incentive. You do something, you get a punishment, that's a negative incentive. So some incentives are direct. Clearly, the running in donuts, that's a direct incentive. Run, get donut, direct incentive. But not all the incentives are direct. Not all of them are so obvious. Here's a picture of what seems to be a happy couple with a newborn baby. But there's something terribly wrong with this picture, at least in terms of incentives. Wonder if you can see it. And it has nothing to do with the little baby who looks a little bit sad. It has everything to do with the hat that the mother is wearing, or that little crown that the mother is wearing. It says Happy New Year. If you know anything about taxes, you know that having a child is a great and wonderful thing. Because now you can deduct them as a dependent from your taxes. And having a child on December 31st is the best thing that could possibly happen because you can use that child as a dependent for the entire calendar year. So let's say you have a baby on December 31st, 2020. Well, that child counts for the whole year. If, sadly, as in this case, your child is born on January 1st, then you have to wait until the next year to count the child as a dependent. So when you file your 2020 taxes, you don't count the child. When you file your 2021 taxes over a year later, after the child is born, then you can count them. Now you say, well, what's this have to do with incentives? And it has actually a lot to do with incentives. Because of the way the tax code is structured, there is an incentive to induce labor so that the child is born on December 31st to get the tax benefit. So the policy that's put in place changes people's behavior, but not in a way that's predictable. You would think, oh, you just have the baby when it's time for the baby to come. Well, if you can get a tax benefit of thousands of dollars, then you might take a riskier approach to having the baby and get the doctor and ask the doctor to induce labor so that the baby can be born sooner. That's what's wrong with the picture. It's an indirect incentive. It's clearly not obvious here what the problem is. But the indirect incentive changes people's behavior in unpredictable ways. Before we leave this happy couple, I just want to mention that seeing indirect incentives is not easy. Not usually, anyway. If you can see these indirect incentives, though, it allows you to evaluate policy and evaluate choices that people make at a deeper level. Those indirect incentives, those things that we don't expect people to do, but they do anyway, those are the kinds of things that sort of separate economists, really good economists, from okay economists. Trying to find those indirect incentives and understand why people respond in unexpected ways. All right, that brings us to our final cornerstone, and that is that trade creates value. Now, trade is a good thing, but we do want to put some caveats on this. Trade has to be voluntary. If you're exchanging with someone because they're threatening to kill you and your family, then that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about voluntary trade, when people make the choice to trade with someone else to get the things that they have. That makes people better off. You know best for yourself what you want that will make you happy, that will help increase the satisfaction you have with life. And maybe you find this stuff on Amazon or eBay or Etsy or just going down to Walmart. If you engage in voluntary trade, then that makes you better off. You say, hey, I want that. Then you trade to get it. And you're happy about that. You won't give up more than you value the item, because that would make you sad. Voluntary trade makes people better off. And one of the things we're going to talk a lot about is the role that markets play in facilitating these kinds of trades. These voluntary, welfare enhancing, which means that it just enhances your satisfaction or your well-being. Those kinds of trades, markets are really, really good at helping to facilitate value-enhancing trades. So, for example, these companies, they make a living, they make lots of money getting buyers and sellers together. Sometimes this happens virtually. Sometimes it happens physically. If you ever have a chance to go out to Seattle and go to Pike's Place Market, you see people selling all kinds of things, unusual things, fascinating things, very good things to eat, very beautiful things to see. Those are places where sellers are trying to get buyers to buy things to make the seller rich, or maybe not rich, but to help the seller cover their costs and pay their own bills. But also, it helps the buyer. If it doesn't help the buyer, then the seller's not going to sell anything. Trade creates value, and it happens online and it happens in the real world. One of the fundamental concerns of internet companies is how secure their services are. If they aren't secure, if people can steal information from them about you, steal your credit card information, steal your social security number, or whatever else, that's going to reduce the number of times people use these services, and consequently it's going to reduce the number of trades, which makes everybody worse off. So there we have it. We have our 4 cornerstones of economics. And if nothing else, if you can remember those 4 things, you're going to know a lot more about economics and just the basics of how economics functions than most people in this world. So the 4 cornerstones, once again, are that all choices entail costs, decisions are made at the margin, incentives matter, and trade creates value. We're going to use those 4 cornerstones pretty much throughout the rest of our course and the rest of our time together. Those cornerstones form just the basic building blocks of what economics is and how we study economics and and how people interact economically. So before we go, I want to just mention one last thing about economics and the importance of economics. A couple of years ago, Bill Gates was giving an interview, and he mentioned that there are 3 skills that will help people be successful in future job markets. One of those skills, of course, is science. One of them is engineering, and the other is economics. Knowing something about science, just basic stuff, is important. Knowing some basic stuff about engineering is important. And if you have those skill sets, it's going to help you be successful in the job market. Those are the kinds of skill sets that businesses and enterprises are looking for. But the third thing on the list is economics. And it's kind of surprising because it's not finance, it's not accounting, it's not these business things. To me, what's the most surprising about that is that everybody's got the capacity to be an economist. In fact, most of us act like economists every day. It's just that we don't know it. So as we go forward in our class, I want to make sure that you know it. I want to make sure that you understand what economics is, how it works, and most importantly, that you're already doing a lot of this stuff. Economics isn't a foreign language. It doesn't have to be. It shouldn't be, because you're already doing this. Gates says you don't have to be an expert in coding or the periodic table. But having the ability to think the way these experts think will help you tremendously. And this isn't a science or an engineering class. This is an economics class. So let's think about economics. Let's think economically. And it's going to help us tremendously going forward. It's going to help you tremendously going forward in the job market.